Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
This is episode 12 in isolation. Just to introduce ourselves as we start this week, because we didn't do yesterday. I'm Mark Van Steenwyk. I'm the director of the Center for Prophetic Imagination in Minneapolis.
And I'm Daniel Wolpert, and I direct the Minnesota Institute of Contemplation and Healing, or Micah. And I'm also in Minneapolis, most of the time anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, and welcome to our video cast. We've had a lot of fun doing these, and we've really appreciated everybody's participation and comments and questions and thoughts. So please jump on with that as soon as you're inspired.
Mm-hmm. Today, here's the description, and I'll put this up every once in a while so people can read if they jump in late. And we would love your comments and questions, but as time passes, we're seeing the increase in social problems, which we'll be talking about, due to isolation. How can we cultivate in-person community in social isolation? Which is a hard concept to kind of think about right now.
Right.
You want to say a little bit more about that, Dan?
Yeah, so this is, we talked, I think on Thursday, about the whole issue of kind of activism and how we might organize and do things that are helpful for people during this time. And this is actually something, my little pet dream is that the thousands of people watching this would all call their public health officials and advocate for this idea, right? So right now we're doing this social isolation thing, which is basically set up as individuals in households. So it's isolation by household, and what a number of us, and we've talked about this here on Transmission, and have talked about, is that this is going to create a lot of social problems. Problems of mental health problems, domestic violence problems, issues related to kids and parenting. We had a great conversation with Ellen on Friday, talking about some of the issues related to that, kids and parenting. And we are already starting to see all these things. So on Monday, the United Nations issued a report. They're seeing a massive worldwide increase in domestic violence. I'm seeing more and more parents talking about how they're kind of going nuts and really having a hard time with their kids. I'm hearing about a lot of kids, especially kids who are only children, at home by themselves without physical interaction with peers, really struggling.
That's my son. He's an only child.
Yeah. And so we're seeing the increase in suicide rates already, and these are directly springing from this individual isolation approach. So, hey Kathleen, good morning. So the question is, why are we not organizing social isolation communities? And so this would be a community of people, and this could be by neighborhood. This could be even at a distance, houses of relatives or friends, where people could know that they are virus free, and so therefore they could come and go between each other's houses, interact with each other, share food prep, share childcare, share homeschooling, and allow themselves to come out of individual social isolation.
I'm imagining some people listening to this are like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And other people, because the dominant narrative we've had in our society is that the only way to stop this is through social distancing. And the only people who reject that are these buttwads that still have mega church or who act like they don't care. And so I'm imagining some people are hearing this thinking, what Dan is talking about is socially irresponsible. He's just like mega church pastor McPasterson, who's still having. So how is what you're talking about different? I mean, we know it's different, but because this isn't, there's other approaches that other societies have taken to great success.
Right.
If all you know is what we're hearing from the orangey Mckee, what is it? I want to remember.
Yeah,
It was Tracy called him the other day from our the Orange Commandant. What he told us, it's that narrative is How's it different?
So I think that's a good new title for the video cast. Transmission, just a couple of buttwads.
I'm trying to find like ways of not like overtly cursing,
right,
to keep it like PG.
Yeah. Right. So let me give one real world example. This is actually happening. So in Spain, there is a one of these fortified cities, one of these ancient medieval fortress cities, perched on top of a mountain. And so what they have decided to do, and those of you that have been to Spain or Portugal, these towns actually are all over the place. It was kind of the in thing back in the day. And so what they've decided to do is this 1,700 people, and what they decided to do was to socially isolate the entire town. And so there are 5 roads into the town. They've closed 4 of them. So nobody can come and go from the town. And the one road that remains open is not open, but rather serves as kind of the town loading dock. And so deliveries come there. The trucks park at the entrance to the town. Everything's unloaded. Everything is cleaned. And then distributed, brought into the town to the various stores. And so basically the town has continued to function normally or quasi-normally. I mean, people can't leave, but, and they have, in Spain, of course, is one of the areas that's the hardest hit. And they have 0 cases of the coronavirus. So, one of the things about these different narratives, and from a scientific point of view, that sort of cracks me up a lot is that, sometimes we start acting as if the virus is like magic, right? Mm-hmm. Like it kind of beams around, through alternate realities or something and attacks us out of nowhere. And of course, this is not true, right? So the idea is that when you have like a group of people who do not have the virus and who are practicing good social isolation, that group of people can interact with each other as much as they want, and they're not going to get sick, right? And the difference between the problem with the megachurch buttwad situation is that those are thousands of people getting together where you have no idea whether or not people have the virus. And some people, of course, do. And so that is what's spreading that. So that's the difference between the two ideas.
What is it that you think is, we were talking before the broadcast that the problems we're seeing now we already had because, capitalist society already breeds alienation. So we already felt distant socially, many of us anyways, in a kind of an existential sort of way. And now everything's intensifying. So all the problems we're seeing now already existed, but they're deeper. And because I tend to see that the dominant narratives in our society, because of capitalist structures, have already been keeping us from knowing how to thrive as community. So now that's like the ways that we even had to continue are ripped out from under us, and we still don't have strategies and ways of even thinking about it. So we're like, we're replacing it with social media, right? Which kind of works. I mean, it helps me a little bit, but I'm also realizing, so my son is having to do class from a computer. And so I was speculating like, look, that's alienating. So if somehow we are still not able to go to school next year, I'm going to start homeschooling, right? But this is already this intensified thing. So I'm wondering, so I understand, that's all to say, socially, I understand why it's hard for us to know what to do. So that's one barrier. But like, what are the other barriers? Like, there's a reason why our government and our governments and our business community or whatever, the people who hold the cards, are not pursuing the strategies that you're talking about. I'm wondering if you have thoughts about why. Like, what is the barrier?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But let's throw up this comment here. What have
Okay.
we got?
Series writes, I think U.S. feds intentionally screw up this pandemic so that they can cause havoc and economic suicide as a means of control while living out their genocidal wishes. Well, I mean, that's a heavy statement.
Yeah.
It does seem like it doesn't seem like it's mere incompetence behind this. It seems like there's an ideological reason why the powers that be have chosen the strategy. And I think a lot of it is economic and dominating kinds of things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like existentially to me, there's a far greater sense of despair if we admit that it is not intentional, but that it actually is just pure incompetence. I feel like even though conspiracy thinking can be super weird at times, I think it gives us greater comfort to at least think that somebody is doing something really messed up intentionally, like at least they know what they're doing. And the notion that, no, this is actually just pure incompetence, in some ways that's more terrifying, right? Because it's totally out of control. And there's a sense of like, oh my gosh, yeah, these people, see, and that's what I think it is. I think that the vast majority of people, especially in Western governments that are engaging with this, have absolutely no idea what they're doing, and that is terrifying. And I think, the best example of this is Boris Johnson. I mean, here's a guy who is running, one of the most powerful countries in the world. He goes into a hospital full of people with no protective gear. He's shaking their hands. He's acting like he's not going to get sick. He goes home. He gets his girlfriend, who is pregnant, sick. And now he's in the ICU. And it's like, this guy is just dumb. I mean, there's nothing intentionally diabolical about him. He's just totally incompetent. So I feel like in some ways, and we've seen this at the tail end of empires, right? You read what these Roman emperors were doing as the empire was dissolving. They were just incompetent, and to me, that's far more unnerving, actually.
And I think that I'll try to keep this from being too abstract, but to me, this is why it's important to me. Like the Apostle Paul talks about the principalities and powers. We might talk about structural violence or institutional violence. There's different ways of talking about this, but to me, there's sort of like the logic of our system gets baked in and has its own priorities. Like you don't have to have individuals with a twirly mustache and executing an evil will, because the system already has its own kind of oppressive inertia, right?
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
in moments like this, a Boris doesn't have to be evil. He just has to play out the logic.
Right.
And then it'll show like the logic is like whether or not Donald Trump actually literally hates poor people or not, which maybe, that's that case. The system hates poor people. So the logic is like there's going to be, it's just genocidal by our history and how our system was created for a situation like this, for rich people to figure out how to get richer, because that's how our system is set up, for those who have the most lack and social vulnerability to be expendable.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it becomes genocidal, whether it's intentional or not.
Yeah, no, that's right on. Yeah, that kind of momentum of the system is baked in. And and you just, you get sort of these people just get plugged into these roles, and then it just keeps going, acting out its logic. Kathleen's got a comment here.
My problem is that here, and this is a good point, and Casey is at Kansas City.
Yep.
I really can't know that I don't have the virus. We do curbside pickup for food, but it isn't 100% safe. My daughter worked from home and died from it 2 days ago. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
so this is something that's really, really sad. And Kathleen, our hearts really go out to you. This is a real tragedy. Kathleen's daughter died a couple days ago from COVID. Yeah, and she brings up the really important point here, which is that our complete flailing around testing, where we have pursued a strategy of testing sick people, which is actually the least helpful strategy and is the opposite strategy that, again, we've mentioned some of these Asian countries have pursued. You don't know 100% if you don't have it. And so again, though, if we were directing testing resources towards testing and isolating, creating these socially isolating communities, which again is essentially what South Korea has done, then it becomes possible to create these communities in a much safer, well, in a safe way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you have to employ both. And again, we could deploy our resources to do it. And I think this is the point, Mark, that you were making a couple minutes ago, right? Is that the logic of an alienated system is just to create more alienation, right?
Yeah.
So we already have this system, which, as you said, and the rates of loneliness are going through the roof in our society. 40% of people report being chronically lonely. Many of our interactions with other people are very dehumanized and just transactional. So yeah, our sense of community is being destroyed by the way that our society functions. So then when there's a crisis, again, this momentum of logic is going to be to say, oh, let's get more alienated. Not how can we form community, because we're not doing that. It's just, yeah, so the logic is let's just all be apart even more.
Well, and this is the whole idea we've talked about, a lot of people are talking about, but if anybody's not familiar with it, Google it, disaster capitalism. Okay, so the logic is that in a crisis, people become more vulnerable, and that makes them more vulnerable to being extracted from. Right. And so it's just going to happen unless there's pressure, like and pushing back against the powerful. Is rich people and powerful people are going to end up being richer and more powerful because of this. Mm-hmm. And with our fractured communities, mm-hmm. It's harder for us to mount any kind of meaningful resistance,
right,
or alternative, which is, that's a real bummer thing to say, but this is the moment we're in, and it's going to get worse.
Yeah. And one of the ways that I've been seeing exactly that, has been the issue of jobs, right? So, I've been hearing several times these reports of like, oh yeah, all these small businesses are going under. But hey, guess what? Amazon is hiring. Microsoft is hiring. Google is hiring, right? And so one of the things that this is doing, right, is that the relatively few number of small businesses that we've had, if they all come out of this destroyed, all these monster capital corporations are like, hey, great, now we've got all these poor, desperate, starving people, and we can just increase our market share even more, right? And just this notion, and some of these reports on the radio, like you hear, I heard the Minnesota economic whatever czar, whatever his job description is, he sounded really excited about this. Okay. Like, isn't it great? Yeah, we're losing all these stores on Main Street, but Amazon is hiring. It's like, no, that's not great, actually. Yeah. But I think it's a perfect example of what you were just describing.
Yeah, and it's just, you think about in the before time about different communities with resilience and strength being like, whether it's different immigrant communities, some of the more clicking religious communities, really healthy unions, like these places of gathering around common cause or values or story, like from your culture, like becoming a source of strength to resist. I mean, that's really what communities have to resist this sort of stuff, and how those are all being fragmented.
Yeah.
So let me add, just for those who have been tuning in late, we're talking about the increase in social problems due to isolation, like pretty much everything that was wrong with our society before, but more. How can we cultivate in-person community in social isolation? Share your thoughts.
Right.
One question I had a question for you, Dan.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to encourage other people to jump on with questions, comments. We've already had a few good ones, and
yeah,
we'd love to have some more before we get to the 30-minute point. Yeah, but Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, in the meantime, so this is another question that kind of, just to make the complications, like bring them front and center. Like, if our society isn't doing testing and we're not doing these things, what should we do? Like, are you advocating that we just kind of start, I mean, people figuring out and playing it by ear how to create their own communities kind of scares me a little bit.
Well, yeah, no, it is, and that's why I said at the beginning, you know, I would love for people to start calling their state public health people and saying, we need you to start doing this. You know, and to me, this would be an awesome level of political activity, is for people to start, you know, calling their state government and saying, we need help creating socially isolated, safe communities. Because you're right, doing it on your own is always going to have a certain amount of risk. But here's the thing, and this is what I really feel like, and I'm starting to hear this already from a few folks. I think people are going to start doing this on their own. I think that people are just not going to be able to take it anymore, and
it'll become psychologically too important for them.
Yeah, it'll just be too stressful, and I think that people are going to start taking that risk. And, you know, for some people, it will be fine, because there will be some groups of people where nobody has the virus, and that'll be fine. For some groups of people, it will not be fine, and it will be a totally hit or miss situation. But I feel like this is a very concrete thing that if people were really agitating and rallying for, because we know it's something that's totally doable. I mean, this is not any kind of bizarre fantasy. This is very workable. What did Kathleen say?
I live across the street from a cemetery. I'm literally talking to dead people.
Yes.
My wife and I, every day my wife and son and I go out somewhere to walk. And so we keep wanting to go to cemeteries. Partly because I like cemeteries, and Amy does too. Jonas thinks they're creepy though, because there's usually not anybody there. And plus there's something existentially, it's like what's that practice, that is a Buddhist practice of charnel grounds kind of practice of contemplation. So I actually think there's probably some benefits to talking to the dead.
Yeah, I actually saw a couple of people walking in a cemetery the other day. So was Maria throwing something up here?
Yep. Maria says, I have struggled with supporting local business. Yeah. To go to the local grocery store, I need to interact with the cashier. If I go to the big box, I can go to the self-checkout line. I feel safer going to the big box than my local grocer.
Yeah.
This is part of the difficulty. Like Amazon, the reason Amazon's doing well is because they created their own mega infrastructure for stuff. They're actually just better and more efficient at a certain point.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense why we'd want to go to them.
Yeah. And, you know, and again, I think that one of the things we could do is to encourage our local stores to start putting up shields in front of checkout lines. The more that people wear masks. I mean, I know that our local Ace Hardware, and of course the hardware store, so they've got all the stuff there, you know, they've created these great screens in front of the checkout stands, so that people are much safer. But yeah, I mean, those are the issues that we're up against. We've got another great comment here about Los Angeles. I was hoping somebody might mention this.
Sari's right. It's my city, Los Angeles, finally increased testing capacity and expanding testing criteria where more people other than those in the hospital,
Yeah.
which that took organizing to make happen. So yes,
Yeah.
some of the larger cities I think can tackle this.
Yeah, so LA just announced yesterday that they are going to try to test everyone. And and that's awesome because again, this is basically the Asian approach, and as soon as we do that, then you get a map of where the virus is, and you now have the ability to start interacting with people and creating safe zones, and this is the way to go, right? And we've seen this most clearly in South Korea, where they've got a little over 10,000 cases, but they have tested over 500,000 people, which is almost 10% of the population. And so they know exactly where the virus is and isn't, which means that people are basically going about their daily lives in most parts of the country.
Mm.
And yeah, I was very excited to see that LA is finally trying to do this. It's the first big city that's actually taking this seriously. But to me, this would be an ideal approach for our small rural towns. I think about all these towns that are under 10,000 people. We should be going there and testing everybody and saying, okay, the virus is not here, allowing them to sort of organize then how they want to deal with that. And yeah, they're not up on a mountaintop in a castle, but they could very easily social isolate from the rest of the world, organize their infrastructure, and allow people to stay in town and have life go on as normal there.
And this is kind of, in a weird way, like this could be another example of an opportunity, or at least a trait, I guess it's trait, but silver lining. Because once you have cities organizing for the common good like that, I think it opens up the door saying like, well, what else could we be doing? Because if we're kind of seeing ourselves as largely on our own, maybe we can seize the means of production while we're at it, or whatever. Right?
Well, and I think that circles back, Mark, to the point that you were making earlier, is that for small communities to start doing this within this predatory capitalist system would be very subversive.
Yes.
And I do think that, again, maybe not consciously, but unconsciously, in terms of that karmic momentum of the principalities and powers, there would be resistance to this. Because you're right. Then suddenly people would start thinking, oh, wait a minute. Like, there's all kinds of things that we should be doing together for the common good that would make a lot of sense.
And a lot of those are things that the Sanders campaign talked about, like these small towns are like in Minnesota and parts of the Dakotas. Sanford Health like runs almost all these rural hospitals, right? And there's other ones like this. Mm-hmm. And Bernie Sanders pushing for municipalizing small hospitals so that they belong to the community. If that had happened, that kind of logic happens. It makes it easier for them to respond because it's not up to some bureaucrat in Denver or whatever to figure out if they want to do that. Other utilities and employment, because we know what happens with Walmart moving in, these big things that are external to the community coming in. It's small towns have been fighting this for a long time, and now we're seeing the alienating limits of that, because none of those companies really care about Pelican Rapids, Minnesota, or Crookston, Thief River Falls, any of these towns in the upper Midwest.
Yeah. So we're nearing the end of our time, and I want to make sure that everybody here. So tomorrow, I'm really excited about tomorrow. We've got another guest, a friend of mine, Lisa Mckee, who is a Methodist pastor and a theologian, and also a real activist in the disability community. And so she has some really interesting insights about the conversation that's been going on within the disability community, how they have been perceiving this, a lot along the lines of like, oh, your life is small and you're stuck at home. Gee, welcome to my world. And so I'm really excited that she's going to be coming on. She lives in West Virginia. So she's actually our first long distance guest. Oh no, that's not true. Ellen lives in Indiana. So we've got another long distance guest, and so please tune in, or if you can't tune in, you could catch it later on the page.
Yeah, all these are going to be there. If you go to the look for transmission video on Facebook, you can look there, and also YouTube channel, the Center for Prophetic Imagination our YouTube channel also shares these archived broadcasts.
So,
yeah.
Good. Any last minute comments, questions here?
Looks like we're good. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and these are important, weighty times. So thanks for engaging with us.
Yeah, great to be with everybody.